James Garner and Steve McQueen worked together on The Great Escape, but behind the scenes they didn't get along at all. Garner, who was known for his charm and steady professionalism, once said of McQueen, "He wasn't an actor, he was a poser." This harsh criticism wasn't just about McQueen's acting, it pointed deeper problems in his life and career. While McQueen tried to project himself as the coolest guy in Hollywood, his actions on set often slowed down productions and annoyed co-stars. What did Garner see in McQueen that made him call him out? To understand why Garner felt this way, we need to dig deeper. It was 1963, and the film, based on a true story from World War II, was one of the biggest projects of its time. McQueen played Captain Virgil Hilts, also known as the Cooler King, and Garner played Kendley, also known as the Scar. McQueen was already a rising star thanks to his role in The Magnificent Seven, but fame came with ego. He wanted his characters to always be the center of attention. When he first read the script for The Great Escape, he hated it because his character wasn't the hero. He complained loudly, and his anger slowed down the whole production. At one point, he even threatened to quit unless things changed. There were changes made to his role. Director John Sturges, who was already managing a large ensemble cast, was ready to move on without McQueen, but the studio wouldn't let him. To make McQueen happy, they added motorcycle stunts to his role, which had nothing to do with the real-life story. The famous scene where Hilts jumps a barbed wire fence on a motorcycle was made up to make McQueen happy. Even at that, McQueen refused to do the jump himself, so Earned had to do it for him. Garner later explained how McQueen's demands affected everyone else. On set, McQueen didn't want to work with others, he wanted to be the center of attention. Garner called him a poser who relied on his macho image instead of real acting, saying that that's the kiss of death. In contrast, Garner was the consummate professional. He made $50,000 for the movie, which was much more than McQueen's $887,500, but he never let his pay affect how he behaved. Garner had served in the Korean War and used his real-life experiences to make his role as Kendley more realistic. His nickname, the Scar, came from his ability to deal with difficult situations. He finally had enough and sat down with McQueen to talk about his problems. McQueen admitted that he didn't like the original script because it made him look corny and not heroic enough. Garner helped calm things down and made sure the production stayed on track. McQueen's behavior wasn't just a problem on The Great Escape, he had ego clashes with other actors throughout his career. For example, during the making of The Towering Inferno, he and Paul Newman fought over everything from screen time to how their names appeared on promotional materials. Both actors wanted to be at the top, so the studio had to come up with a creative way to make sure McQueen's name appeared first horizontally and Newman's was higher. Vertically, McQueen also counted lines in the script to make sure Newman didn't have more dialogue than him. When he found out Newman had 12 more lines, he reportedly erupted in anger. This wasn't the only time this happened on the set of The Magnificent Seven. McQueen's antics almost drove Yul Brynner to suicide. McQueen would steal scenes by moving props or adjusting his hat in the background to draw attention to himself. Brynner, who was known for being a strong leader, found McQueen's actions annoying. McQueen's rebellious image made him popular with fans, but it caused problems with his co-workers. Garner said McQueen had created this persona, but it wasn't real. Said that McQueen was just a movie star, while Marlon Brando was a real actor who could be tough. This difference was important to Garner, who liked real people in real life and in movies. On the screen, he thought that McQueen's focus on image over substance hurt his work and turned off people around him. Despite the tensions, Garner and McQueen stayed friends after The Great Escape. Garner's laid-back personality probably played a big role in this. While others were turned off by McQueen's behavior, Garner seemed to take it in stride. Later in life, McQueen reportedly reached out to some of the people he had fought with to ask for forgiveness as he faced terminal cancer. Yul Brynner was one of those people. The Great Escape is still a classic in part because of the charisma and acting of its stars. Steve McQueen's motorcycle scenes became famous, and James Garner's performance as Kendley gave the ensemble cast more depth. Other actors, like Charles Bronson and Donald Pleasance, brought their real-life war experiences to their roles, which added a layer of authenticity. Behind the scenes, the drama didn't hurt the movie's success. Instead, it added to the mythology of Hollywood's golden age, when big personalities clashed but still made unforgettable art. James Garner's review of Steve McQueen is still one of the most biting. McQueen had some of the most interesting flaws in Hollywood history. He wasn't just the king of cool on screen, he was also a deeply troubled person who struggled to balance his talent, ambition, and ego. James Garner and Steve McQueen were often compared as two leading men of Hollywood's golden era, but when you look more closely, the differences couldn't be more apparent. On the surface, McQueen had it all: the style, the swagger, and the rugged cool that made him the king of cool, but behind the scenes, there was another story. McQueen's life, while full of movie successes, was marked by insecurity and a need to dominate. James Garner, on the other hand, had a quiet strength and genuine goodness that made him stand out both on screen and in real life. If you're looking for a Hollywood icon to admire, Garner is it. Take McQueen's signature charm, for example. It worked wonders on the big screen, where his brooding expressions and quiet intensity stole the show in movies like A Bullet and The Great Escape, but that same intensity showed up in his personal life in a much darker way. Queen had a rough start in life, and while you can relate to that, he didn't deal with his pain in the healthiest ways. Stories from. He was controlling, angry, and even abusive. And there's a scary story from his marriage that sticks with you. When his wife Nell visited him on set while filming Lawn, she found women following him around everywhere. McQueen didn't bother to deny it. He admitted he was cheating on her, but instead of taking responsibility, he put the blame on her. At one point, he allegedly forced her to do drugs, put a gun to her head, and forced her to confess to an affair she never had. It's hard to connect that image with the McQueen you see in movies, who seems cool and confident, but that's the thing, his cool was just a mask. Cultivated an image that didn't reflect who he was, and this showed in many of his professional relationships. For example, on the set of The Towering Inferno, his rivalry with Paul Newman became legendary, and McQueen even counted the lines in their scripts to make sure Newman didn't have more dialogue than he did. Now compare that to James Garner, who had a similar rough upbringing. His stepmother abused him, and his childhood wasn't a walk in the park. But instead of letting that make him angry or self-centered, Garner chose a different path. He became someone who stood up for others and used his experience to make the world a better place. It was easier to get along with Garner because he was a rare breed in Hollywood, where egos run wild. He wasn't just known for his talent, but also for his kindness. If a director mistreated someone on set, Garner wouldn't hesitate to step in and stand up for them, because he believed that everyone should be treated with respect, no matter their status or role. And unlike McQueen, Garner didn't have to work on being a cool guy. He had the charm, humor, and confidence to carry himself naturally, whether he was in the Rockford Files or Maverick. While McQueen's driving skills are often praised, Garner was also very good. Professional racing coach Bob Bondurant once said that Garner could have competed in Formula One and beaten some of the drivers at the time. During the filming of Grand Prix, Garner drove, and the results were stunning. The movie is a joy to watch, a lively celebration of racing that feels miles ahead of McQueen's Lehman, which many find slow and uninspired. What makes Garner stand out, though, is how he treated the people around him. He was married to his wife Lois for 58 years, which is very rare in Hollywood, and he lived like a star off screen, too. Of course, McQueen had times when he was weak and hurt, and you could see the hurt behind his bravado. It's sad that he died so young. It makes you wonder if he might have grown and changed with more time. But the truth is that he often let his insecurities get the best of him, lashing out at others in ways that hurt them. There's a telling moment from their time in Hollywood that sums it all up. McQueen, who was always suspicious and insecure, thought his wife was cheating on him with James Garner. When confronted, Garner didn't like to lash out or get defensive. Instead, he just said, "I wasn't a bad guy, I was just insecure." Many things about Garner made him angry or offended, but he chose grace instead. He saw through McQueen's tough guy act and knew it was just a cover for his weaknesses. It's easy to see why people like McQueen's image. He had the sunglasses, the leather jackets, and the undeniable star power, but when you look a little closer, it's Garner who really shines. He didn't just look the part, he lived it, embodying the kind of honesty, kindness, and strength that makes someone truly cool. So if you want to be like one of these Hollywood icons, think twice before reaching for those McQueen-style shades. Instead, take a page from Garner's playbook and be kind to everyone. At the end of the day, that's the kind of cool that matters. Steve McQueen's life ended suddenly and tragically, but not before a whirlwind of controversial health struggles and a legacy that still sparks conversation today. McQueen's final years were far from the cool, confident persona he displayed on screen. Instead, they showed a man desperately trying to maintain control as his health spiraled. It started with a cough in 1978. He quit smoking. But things only got worse. Then he started having trouble breathing. Doctors were scrambling for answers in late 1979. After finishing filming The Hunter, the grim diagnosis came. Multiple myeloma is a rare and aggressive cancer that is often linked to asbestos exposure. When McQueen heard the news, it was devastating, but he didn't give up. He believed that the cancer started when he was in the Marines and removed asbestos from pipes on a troop ship. Other people thought it might have been asbestos in his racing gear or even insulation on film sets. As the disease spread, McQueen looked for unconventional treatments. He refused to accept that there was no cure and traveled to Mexico for therapies that included live cell injections, coffee enemas, and a controversial drug called lateral. None of these treatments were medically sound, but McQueen was determined that they would work. The treatments cost him a lot of money, fortune of up to $40,000 a month, but money didn't matter to him at that point. By the time he got back to the U.S. in late 1980, cancer had spread to his body, and he had tumors in his neck and belly, one of which was so big it weighed 5 pounds. McQueen refused all medical advice and went ahead with risky surgery in Juárez, Mexico, to remove the tumors. It was a last-ditch effort, but his weak heart couldn't handle it, and he died just hours after the surgery on November 7, 1980. He was only 50 years old. McQueen's death marked the end of an era. He was known as the King of Cool. His untimely death left fans in mourning, and over the years his legacy has only grown. McQueen is remembered as a tough, independent person, and streets are named after him. He even won an Optimus Award for raising awareness about Jesus-related diseases. But James Garner's life was very different. He outlived McQueen by decades, living to be 86 years old, but he too had his share of health problems. His knees were damaged from years of stunts and physical roles, and by the 2000s he had had 2 knee replacement surgeries and a major health scare in 1988 that led to 5 bypass heart surgeries. Unlike McQueen, Garner never fully escaped the chaos of his life. Garner was stable and strong. He quit smoking late in life, even after doctors told him it was bad for him. He kept going even though he had strokes and his health got worse in his later years. When he died in 2014, the love and respect from his peers was overwhelming. Clint Eastwood, who worked with Garner and knew him well, said it best: Garner opened the door for people like Steve McQueen and myself. Tom Selleck, who looked up to Garner as a mentor, said Jim was a friend, and I will miss him. Sally Field, who worked with him on Murphy's Romance, called him a diamond, a rare gem in an industry full of egos, but it wasn't just Garner's long career that made him stand out. Garner was a family man who was married to Lois for almost 60 years. He didn't just play the good guy on screen, he lived it by supporting civil rights, mentoring younger actors, and treating everyone he worked with like an equal, even in his last years when his health was failing. Garner was the personification of dignity, and his legacy lives on not only through his work, but also through the people he touched. In Norman, Oklahoma, there is a statue of him as a reminder of the man who brought warmth and realism to every role he played. The stark contrast between McQueen and Garner goes beyond their careers. McQueen, who was always the rebel, fought his illness with all he had, even as his choices became more reckless. Garner, on the other hand, faced his health problems with quiet determination, adapting and finding ways to keep going. It's hard not to wonder what McQueen's life might have been like if he'd lived longer. Would he have calmed down with age, made peace with his demons, and found the kind of happiness Garner did? Or would his insecurities and need for control have continued to define him? One thing is for sure, both men left an indelible mark on Hollywood. McQueen will always be remembered for. Garner's legacy shines brighter for the way he treated others and lived his life with integrity. They were both larger-than-life figures who captivated audiences, but they had very different views on the world around them. If McQueen was the troubled star who burned bright and fast, then Garner was the steady force who showed that being honest and kind could be just as captivating. As we look back on their lives, it's clear that their legacies aren't just about the roles they played or the cars they drove. They're about the choices they made, the people they were, and the ways they continue to inspire us today.